We're going to turn now to the crisis in Syria. Over the last 21 months, human rights groups say more than 40,000 people have been killed during fighting between the government and rebel forces. So far, the international community has been reluctant to intervene, but overnight, NATO has agreed to send Patriot anti-missile batteries to the Turkey-Syria border. Now, there has been some shelling across the border that Turkey has been increasingly worried about. There are also concerns about Syria's chemical and biological weapons capabilities and fears that it may arm missiles with chemical weapons, something Syria says it wouldn't use against its own people. But clearly NATO is somewhat concerned about this, and it does escalate tensions there in the region. To discuss, we're now joined by Dr. Adam Lockyer from the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. Thanks for your time. Can I start by asking how seriously we should take this talk, this intelligence that is apparently there about Syria having chemical weapons?
So the two big questions that people are asking today is, first off, do they have these weapons? And second of all, would they use them? Now, 10 years ago, we would probably say they definitely have stockpiles of sarin, VX and mustard gas. But after the debacle in Iraq and the intelligence failures there are still question marks about, well, how much chemical weapons Syria possesses and what style of chemical weapons they possess.
That's the thing. We all remember everyone saying that Saddam Hussein had chemical and biological weapons that turned out not to be there. So how credible is the intelligence now?
Yeah, exactly right. And this is the big question mark. So, and the chemical weapons that Syria is supposed to have are the same chemical weapons that Iraq was supposed to have. So I think we have to take the threat of Syria possessing these chemical weapons seriously. But like I said, 10 years ago there'd be no doubt, but after Iraq there is now a question mark.
Well, if they do have these sorts of chemical weapons, the deployment of Patriot anti-missile batteries, what is that designed to do? Would it actually stop attacks within Syria, or is this just about stopping missiles going across the border into Turkey?
The Patriot missiles deployment, that's all about containing the conflict within Syria. So the Obama administration's great concerns now is that the conflict in Syria will spread. Might flow over into Turkey, it might flow over into Iraq or into Lebanon. And so they're trying to contain the conflict in Syria within its own borders. And so by deploying these Patriot missiles along the Turkish border, hopefully this will stop in-flight incursions by Syrian aircraft into Turkish airspace.
Is it likely to provoke any sort of reaction from the Assad regime in Syria, or is there not much they can do about this anyway?
There's very little they can do, and they've got their hands full no matter what with their insurgents. So I don't think that's going to provoke any sort of real response from the Syrians, despite a bit of maybe hairy-chested boistering. Besides that, no real action.
What about the mood in Washington on this? Clearly there has been a reluctance to get involved in another Middle East war. Now that the election is out of the way for President Obama, does he have more scope to look at this and look at what possibly can be done to what has been an awful and awfully long problem in Syria?
Yeah, so the Obama administration's great successes of his first term were the withdrawal of American forces from Iraq and the winding down of the conflict in Afghanistan. They don't want US forces sucked into a large Middle Eastern country with an ongoing conflict. That's the last thing they want. The second concern is that the Obama administration has been pushing hard on reducing nuclear weapons between Russia and the United States. And by intervening in the Syrian conflict, that may harm that objective as well. So the United States has been trying to keep aloof of this particular conflict, and everything they've done up to this point has been with that aim in mind.
Because, as I think President Obama pointed out during the election campaign, Syria is very different to Libya. We are talking about a much stronger military capability.
Oh, absolutely. So it's a much larger country, whereas Libya has only about 6 million people. Syria has over 20 million people. It's far more military capable and also has powerful international friends in the form of Iran and Russia. So the United States has no stomach for getting involved with Syria, and these comments coming out of Washington today about Syrians should not use chemical weapons is all with that in mind as well. They know that if Syria uses chemical weapons, the United States will have no choice but to intervene. And so by coming out and making these statements, they're trying to keep the conflict contained within an acceptable threshold of violence, but also within its borders.
Are you able to say, and is it possible to know, what behind-the-scenes support the US may be providing to some of these rebel forces in Syria?
I'd say that's been cautious support. So first off, the United States has been involved on the political side of trying to form a coalition. So the opposition is now very diverse, with a whole bunch of factions that probably hate the Assad regime only slightly more than they hate each other. So they've been trying to build a political coalition which they can work with. Second of all, there has been reports of American special forces operating on the Turkish side and sort of asking them what sort of resource they need in terms of weapons and other capabilities such as this. So although the United States is not involved within Syria itself, on the Turkish border, side of the border, I'm sure there's been movements to help the insurgents.
Dr. Adam Lockyer from the US Studies Centre, thanks so much for joining us. We're out of time for today's program. Thanks for your company as well. After the break, the very latest Sky News.